So, I had a dog when I was growing up. He was, as most have, a pet at some point. He was more of a best friend to me than some might have realized at those times. He was a half collie, half husky. And when my biological parents decided that they were going to take him in because the foster parent that my biological father had, Mrs. Hardwick, was going to put him down because he was so friendly, he kept escaping, and instead of finding him a home or what was needed, she was just tired of having to chase after him. And essentially, here's an additional military influence. My dog, A, which is short for AWOL, because that was what the Navy had called him, I called him A, short for Anubis. I thought that that was ideal. So the way I got A was because we went, meaning my biological parents and I, went to Mrs. Hardwick's house. She lived near a naval base where they had done some training. And she was explaining to Mike and Anna she was tired of getting calls from the Navy that he had gone AWOL, and they had him there, which I'll get into because that's actually a really funny story what he did to some of the recruits. So I was about 2 years old, and everybody was having pizza. And as a 2-year-old, and people know how 2-year-olds can be, when I was done, I gave my pizza crust to A, because, I didn't want it anymore. And then he started eating it, and then as a 2-year-old, those who have been around toddlers, you know how this goes. Possibly. So I walked over, or toddled over back to him, opened his mouth, took the pizza crust out, and A just sat there looking up at me like, alright, whenever you feel like giving that back to me, because, it was covered with his slobber and stuff like that. And, at the time, alright, you can have it back. But then, you know how toddlers are. I opened his mouth back up and I took the pizza crust back out. Mike and Anna just kind of stood in shock that, first and foremost, I opened a full-grown half collie, half husky's mouth to take out the pizza crust. That was the first thing that they were shocked about. And then the second thing was that A, the dog, just looked at me, didn't growl, didn't snarl, didn't bark, just laid there, didn't move, just was very docile. And those who know husky breeds as well as collie breeds, it's not necessarily the most normal thing for either breed to just sit there and let that happen. After a few minutes back and forth, A became my dog. Well, in reference to the Navy branch that was nearby, I don't know who was stationed in that area. I have a feeling there are some guys who might actually remember this. So A would escape from the backyard of Mrs. Hardwick's house. And Mrs. Hardwick was not able to find out where he could actually escape from, because all of the stuff was boarded in and doubled down and all that sort of stuff, and she couldn't figure out how he got out. Well, A would go and run over to where the Navy base was. There's this huge swamp because of certain training exercises that went out there, and he went swimming. Those who know how collie and husky breeds fur is, he got covered in all that swamp stuff. And he just swam around. And then a group of trainees would go to the area, and this particular area that he would usually go to, it was where the training course was for where the rope is in the tree, and the trainees would go run, grab onto the rope, and swing across to the other side. Well, if A was swimming in there, he usually would just kind of stay, you know, kind of in the water, swamp stuff, and just kind of look out. And then when he felt like it, he would jump out and just be, "Arr!" But he was a friendly dog. Nonetheless, the recruits, the trainees, would inevitably be freaked out because they didn't know it was a dog that was completely covered in swamp gook. And then they'd fall in the water, and then A would go after them to go play with them. But they, of course, initially did not necessarily realize that. So after a while, they realized it was A, and the trainers knew that he was doing that. So, you know, they would, whenever he would do that, they'd clean him up and then, you know, spend some time with him and then call Mrs. Hardwick and have her come pick him up. The irony is usually he would be there for a couple of days before they'd actually call her because he's a friendly dog. You know, half collie, half husky, the breed just mixed correctly. And, you know, he'd hang around with all of the different guys on the Navy base. And then, all right, fine, we'll call her and let her know. And so it got to the point where, you know, the different changes through the different graduating groups. And so only the trainers knew that A would randomly do this. And so they never knew when he'd be there either. So, you know, one day they'd go out and he wouldn't do anything, and, you know, they'd talk and be like, no, he wasn't there today. And then they knew what to look for when he would be out there. So they'd just get the trainees and go get the rope. And inevitably, A would wait until certain guys, and it was never in a malicious way, it was never in a mean way, but he'd just kind of be swimming in the swamp area with all the muck and stuff like that embedded in that half collie, half husky fur, and just kind of get real close, and then right when it was the right time, he'd jump out of the water. And inevitably the trainee would fall into the swamp, and it would go back and around. So I guess this particular official YouTube video, I apologize that he became my dog. Because I'm sure at some point in time, you know, some of the trainers were like, well, where'd he go? And yeah, he's my dog. I took really good care of him, though, as best as I could. But yeah, that was my boy, and I would go and read stories to him as a child, as if he could understand what I was reading to him, and I'd take him around in the backyard, because the house that I grew up in had a football field-sized property, despite it being in the state of New Jersey, and go out to the very back area where the lilacs and the raspberry and dogwood trees were. That's the part of the yard that I would usually take him to. He'd sit and I'd read to him. He was as big as a horse to me because I was a child. He was strong like one as well, as there are those who know. And I spent more time with him as a child, and sometimes because of certain situations, especially as I had gained a sibling biologically, and that was where I spent the majority of my youth. And so, you know, he's a special dog, that's for certain, but I kind of wonder how many guys who would have been stationed in that area might have remembered that. Whether you were a trainee or a trainer. You know what type of dog he was. So yeah, he would scare them, just absolutely petrify them. Though when you really think about it, you know, a fluffy dog, and he got to about 75, 80 pounds, covered in swamp stuff with his, you know, thick fur. The irony is certain military uniform gears for certain special guys, little guys. Your gear kind of looks like what he looked like before the Navy cleaned him up and polished him to be all clean and fluffy. Though there were Marine guys and Coast Guard guys also stationed at that base. So it's kind of, as well as Army and Air Force. But yeah. So anyway, you guys have a good one. Like, comment, hopefully positively. Share and subscribe to my official YouTube channel. And go to my website, www.susanmealing.com. Have a good one.